He's bad, and that's good. He'll never be good, and that's not bad. He's Wreck-It Ralph, the kindest bad guy in the arcade. But what does good or bad, moral or immoral look like in a system where characters are pre-programmed to carry out roles in a game? Does being good mean getting a medal for fixing some busted windows? And does being bad mean giving the player a game over? We're about to find out. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and this is Wreck-It Ralph Good to Evil. And yes, we'll be covering the sequel too.
I'm gonna wreck it!
Let's start with the #1 spot for Best Good Guy, Fix-It Felix Jr. Fix-It Felix Jr. is an all-around handyman and the hero of his own game, as well as an incredibly kind soul whose programming compels him to do one thing: fix it.
I can fix it!
When Ralph breaks a building, he fixes it, every day for 30 years. For this, he's treated to a hero's welcome by the folks of Niceland inside his video game. But Felix never lets this go to his head. He's down to earth and appreciative.
Good job, everyone!
His one downside is that his convictions are so strong that it's difficult for him to comprehend in which version of good or triumph isn't the best outcome for everyone. For 30 years, while always being amiable to Ralph,
Ralph, I'm so glad to see you!
he had no idea that Ralph resented being forced to be the bad guy and being kicked out of Niceland day after day. He simply assumed that Ralph embodied the badness he externalized in his day job as Wreck-It Ralph. In short, Felix is his day job, Ralph isn't. This disconnect is something that Felix never knew until Ralph went AWOL and escaped the game. Now, a weaker character may have collapsed in the face of such cognitive dissonance, but not Felix. Instead, he falls back on his old school beliefs that he has to fix what Ralph wrecks.
And it is my job to fix what Ralph wrecks.
And proceeds to track his coworker down. Along the way, he finds love in a sharpshooting sergeant and eventually is able to grow enough to see the world from Ralph's perspective,
I'm gonna wreck it!
eventually helping him save the arcade from the SCI Bugs and Turbo. And in the sequel, he and his new bride, Calhoun, adopt the orphaned Candy Crush Racers, which is a thankless job.
But hey, now I'm a father of 15. Isn't that just a blessing?
And, incredibly, parent them into model children. There's truly nothing that Felix can't fix. Hot on Felix's heels is a character with very little screen time, but an outside influence on the moral backbone of the Wreck-It Ralph universe, Zangief. Zangief is a villain from the Street Fighter series and a member of Bad Anon, the bad character support group.
Right here. I'm Zangief, I'm bad guy.
When Ralph is having second thoughts about being a bad guy, Zangief is able to offer a touching, or crushing, story of his realization that the bad guy allows the good guy to exist.
If Zangief is good guy, who'll crush man's skull like sparrow's egg between thighs?
And therefore allows the player to triumph. Zangief, you are a bad guy, but this does not mean you are bad guy. Without the challenge of the bad guy, there can be no good, and therefore no triumph. This concept of fulfilling the role but not letting the role define a character neatly captures the philosophy of Wreck-It Ralph.
So, I'm happy to report, and you'll be happy to hear, I'm taking life one game at a time.
And eventually how the citizens of Niceland treat Ralph by the end of the movie, as a good guy who plays bad. Truthfully, many of the villains at the meeting seem like sweethearts, so we could probably put many of them around here on the list. Bowser, Satine, Clyde the Pac-Man ghost, but Zangief is the best ambassador of the group, and he really gives the best words of wisdom, so we chose to focus on him.
Hey, one game at a time, Ralph.
Given the fact that there are so many of them and they all work together for the same goals, we're gonna throw in all of the Disney princesses next. Yes, there are a lot of them, but given the fact that their roles are relatively small in the context of the Wreck-It Ralph universe, we can't rank them all separately. Then again, maybe we should do Disney princesses good to evil in a future episode. It goes without saying that Disney princesses are good characters. In fact, they're heroes in their own right, but at the same time, they aren't really heroes in their traditional sense. Contextually, they're fictional characters even within the fictional Wreck-It Ralph story. Confusingly meta, maybe. But they're also very sweet and nice characters who immediately befriend and help Vanellope.
All hail Princess Vanellope. the queen of comfy.
And let's not forget that they also help Ralph during the climax of the movie, proving that even when you put aside their traditional backstories, they're still heroes in this universe as well.
Look up there! It's a big, strong man in need of rescuing.
Following next is the man who makes the magic possible, Mr. Litwalk. He is the longtime owner and operator of the arcade, a kind-hearted soul who has a real affinity for his games.
Oh boy, looks like the game's gone cuckoo.
Like my nana.
Almost treating them like the conscious beings that they secretly are. When he has to unplug a malfunctioning game, we see him in genuine emotional pain. This is a man who cares. Not only does he care about his games,
Hey, Ralph's back! Isn't that great? The gang's all here!
but he also cares about his patrons.
Sorry, sweetie. Here's your quarterback.
He works hard to ensure his arcade is up to snuff for his young customers, threading the needle between the latest technological breakthrough and the classic oldies. Up next, we finally have Ralph, the bad guy in the video game Fix-It Felix Jr.
I'm gonna wreck it!
He wrecks a building every day. That's his day job. However, as the bad guy, Ralph has had to endure years of abuse at the hands of the citizens of Niceland.
If I'm really honest with myself, I see Felix up there, getting patted on the back. Sometimes I think, man, sure must be nice being the good guy.
And he's become resentful.
I've never been more serious about anything in my life.
It's the resentment that ultimately drives Ralph to try and become a good guy by abandoning his game in pursuit of becoming a hero. Unfortunately, leaving his game makes Fix-It Felix Jr. unplayable, threatening the game with being unplugged from the arcade. A pretty selfish choice. It's this push and pull between being selfish and selfless that propels Ralph through both movies. In the first, his antics accidentally unleash a wave of monstrous SCI Bugs on the game Sugar Rush, where he winds up befriending a young racer, Vanellope, and ultimately uncovers a conspiracy to keep Vanellope, the true ruler of Sugar Rush, as an unplayable outcast by the diabolically sweet King Candy. When the coins are down,
There's no one I'd rather be than me.
Ralph makes the decision to sacrifice himself in order to save Vanellope's life, rescuing the arcade in the process. In the sequel, Ralph has made peace with being a bad guy, as long as the citizens of Niceland realize it's just his day job. He hasn't, however, made peace with how friendships can evolve. Ralph's greatest weakness in the sequel again falls back on his selfishness.
No, she's been brainwashed. Because the Vanellope I know would never abandon me like that.
He fears losing his friend Vanellope to a new and cool game, and in a moment of weakness, he releases a virus to slow down Vanellope.
I didn't mean for it to happen like this. It's not supposed to be this bad.
He ultimately has to, literally, face his weaknesses and overcome them, and ultimately has to let his friend make her own decisions. But it's still a profoundly tough moment of growth for our lovable wrecker. His tireless persistence, his huge heart, and powerful penchant for personal growth place Ralph as number 5 on our list of good to bad. Frankly, Ralph's soul-searching did him good, but a few more meetings with Bad Anon and maybe a self-help book or two might help him out. And speaking of books, there are plenty of audio versions on Audible, which we're lucky enough to have as our sponsor. Audible's content includes an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original shows, news, comedy, and more. In fact, a lot of the best Disney films have been adapted to audiobooks, including Wreck-It Ralph. If you'd like to help support the channel, use our link in the description for a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial. Sign up at audibletrial.com/WickedBinge. We love cartoons and movies, but we also love binging audiobooks on Audible. And remember, signing up for a free trial helps support the creation of our content. Moving on, we have everyone's favorite non-alcoholic barman, Tapper. Tapper is a bit like Mr. Litwalk. He operates an establishment that brings people together, and he does a damn fine job doing it.
Tapper, need a root beer.
Coming.
He's there to offer some sage advice when asked,
I'm sorry, who's acting insecure? Ralph, come on, the kid just lost a game. Give her a break.
or sling down a half a dozen root beers. He's a pro who's always there to help out a customer without serving up a single complaint. Next up, let's talk about Sergeant Calhoun. She is the no-nonsense leader of Heroes Duty,
It's make your mama's proud time!
a new and dangerous shooter game in the arcade. She is programmed to help the player destroy the SCI Bug menace,
Cyber! Robocop, take it, newbie!
and will stop at nothing to eliminate their threat.
Watch it, rookie! These monsters become what they eat!
Her gruff nature comes from having the most tragic backstory ever programmed. Her fiancé was killed by SCI Bugs on their wedding day. This mental wound has stripped Calhoun of her friendly nature and threatens to consume her with thoughts of vengeance, but by teaming up with plucky Fix-It Felix, she's able to learn how to move on and eventually find love again. Plus, like her new husband, she adopted the orphaned racers from Sugar Rush. That's charity work. Now let's talk about Ralph's best friend and the rightful ruler of Sugar Rush, Vanellope. When we first met Vanellope, she was an outcast kid in a racer game who just wanted to race, and for some reason, no one would let her do so. Instead, she was mocked as a dangerous glitch. Her goal was to win a single after-hours race, because then she'd finally be playable by kids in the arcade. To accomplish this, she needed an entry token. When Ralph crashes into the game from Hero's Journey, she steals his medal as her entry token.
Yeah, well, now it's my thing.
Theft is a crime. She doesn't win the race, but she does win a friend, and ultimately she uses her incredible glitching powers to save Ralph's life in the finale, whisking him to safety. Even after being revealed as the princess and ruler of Sugar Rush, Vanellope pardons the bullies who have wronged her for so long.
As your merciful princess, I hereby decree that everyone who was ever mean to me shall be executed.
After joking about killing them, of course. It's this drive for what is right, combined with her self-sacrifice and mercy, that lands Vanellope firmly on the ranking of good on Good to Evil. Finally, we're back to sequel characters, next with Yes, the head algorithm at BuzzTube, a video sharing site.
I am the head algorithm of BuzzTube.
She is all about finding, sharing, and monetizing the next big trend.
Hearts are money, honey.
But she's not a total cold corporate demon. She's sympathetic to our hero's plight,
This man is on fire.
trying to raise money for Sugar Rush, and she helps Ralph manufacture ways to go viral.
I love it! That is what the internet was made for! Now, let's get to work.
She's a busy woman, and she easily could have ignored Ralph. Granted, she almost did until she saw his and Vanellope's viral potentials,
I don't have time to trifle with every shoeless, mouth-breathing hobo.
so you can certainly argue that her sympathy extends barely beyond her pocketbook.
It's not all bad. The internet can also be a place where you find a steering wheel at one website and make enough money to buy it at another one.
It's this intersection of sympathy and self-interest that lands Yes a bit further down our list. On the topic of sequel characters, we have to talk about Shank. Shank is a tough racer from the online game Slaughter. She mercilessly ends players' lives without a care.
Pyro, give those punks the works.
With pleasure.
In fact, she views it as her duty to do so, to teach them the value in failure.
But if we just let them win, where's the life lesson?
When Vanellope and Ralph try to boost her car for cash, Shank engages the two of them in a race to the near death in order to get her stolen car back.
I believe you have something of mine.
Which is fair. In consolation, she even directs the two car thieves to her friend, Yes, which is pretty nice.
There are much better ways to make money on the internet.
Next up, we have Knowsmore. Another character from the sequel, Knowsmore is a search engine. He's pretty much strictly neutral.
Welcome back to the search bar, madam.
You start a query, he finishes it.
Where can I find ballet?
Ballet shoes, ballet classes, ballet folkloric.
And then he finds your answer.
I found 23 million results.
His only downside is his torrent of autofill solutions if you don't finish your query. So get the question in fast.
They never say thank you.
Moving on to some minor baddies. First, the law enforcement duo, Winchell and Duncan. Sure, they are subordinates of King Candy, aka Turbo.
Come here, kid. We're not gonna hurt you, you little freak.
But they're just low-level law enforcement doing their jobs.
Now we got him.
That said, they do seem to be prone to anger and violence, even harassing Ralph when he's trapped in a cupcake. That's police brutality.
Get the tools.
What tools?
Quiet, you. Ow!
What? No!
Take it easy, big boy.
Stay away from me!
But it seems like they put their old ways behind them by the end of the movie once Vanellope takes over.
Pardon me for asking, but without a princess, who's gonna lead us?
Next, Sour Bill. Sour Bill is one of King Candy's minions.
All hail our rightful ruler, King Candy.
And one of the few who knows that Vanellope isn't actually a glitch, but a true racer whose code was sabotaged by King Candy. He only reveals this information under torture from Ralph.
I'll take it to my grave.
But the subsequent reveal by Bill that King Candy stole his, and everyone else's in the game's, memory leads a little credence to the idea that Sour Bill is only supporting King Candy out of fear.
Okay, I'll talk.
Regardless, he still imprisons Fix-It Felix and does nearly everything in his sour little power to keep Vanellope from restoring her powers. Not a sweet guy. Below Sour Bill is Spamly, a bit of a no-good huckster that lurks around the internet.
I'll be right here if you change your mind, brother!
He's a spam algorithm who Vanellope and Ralph run into in an attempt to raise some money.
Want to get rich playing video games? Click right here to find out how.
Back off, pop-up.
He wants to help. Granted, the first job he gave them was to boost a highly desirable car from the game's slaughter.
Is $40,000 lucrative enough for you?
And he eventually points Ralph in the direction of a virus engineer.
Now, this area down here is what's called the dark net. A lot of shady characters hang out down here, so try to keep a low profile.
But at least the guy is somewhat upfront about what he offers. Cash for a crappy job well done.
Park it right here, Ralph. Your old pal JP's family's got you.
Next, we have the Sugar Rush Racers. Pre-Felix and Calhoun adoption, of course. The Racers, led by ace racer Tafita,
Oh, Vanellope. It's so... you.
Are a cliquey group of sweet-themed kids who have it out for Vanellope, or as they call her, the Glitch. They make it their life's work to stop Vanellope from participating in the Sugar Rush games, going as far as to sabotage her cart. Granted, their memory had been altered by King Candy, but even in the sequel, these rascals were shown to be a handful.
Hey, Mom! Why does your lame TV only have one channel?
It's only because of the superhuman parenting of Felix and Calhoun. Seriously, how did they pull it off?
Oh, golly, I'm sorry you didn't win, Taffeta.
Oh, our friendship is much more important to me than winning, Rancis.
Did these little sugar bombs and candle heads finally become as sweet as they should have been from the start? A good guy who's really just an a-hole, Gene.
Why is he here?
Gene is the head of the residents of Niceland and purposely excludes Ralph from the game's 30th year anniversary party.
No. You see, Ralph, there's no room for you up here.
His cruel ostracizations
Only good guys win medals, and you, sir, are no good guy.
Sets Ralph in motion on a quest to prove he's a good person, ultimately putting the entire arcade at risk. Had he tried to put aside his prejudice and seen Ralph as a person and not a monster, he may have avoided a catastrophe. Instead, his arrogance made things a whole lot worse before they got better. Now, we're heading into the home stretch. These are the bad guys who really are bad guys. Our fourth most evil character in the Ralph universe, Double Dan. Double Dan is a virus engineer. He inhabits the darknet and creates products with the intent to disable or otherwise compromise elements of the internet. Sure, he takes pride in his craft, his viruses are excellent.
Allow me to introduce you to Arthur.
But he is the internet equivalent of a weapons dealer.
Arthur's what I call an insecurity virus.
And an illegal one at that. It's his virus, Arthur, that Ralph misuses and nearly breaks the internet.
In breaking news, the internet is under assault as a massive denial of service attack crashes servers across the web.
It's a virus programmed to amplify insecurity in order to destroy. Heavy evil. In second place, it's the SCI Bugs, the villains of Hero's Duty. Like the replicating Ralphs in the sequel, the SCI Bugs are mindless. They do not understand they inhabit a video game, and as such, they cannot differentiate between their role as characters and their off-the-clock existence. They're programmed to destroy, and it's only through their game's use of a beacon that they are kept in check. Unlike the Ralphs, who are just multiplied insecurities, the SCI Bugs are programmed destructors. Destruction is not their byproduct, it is their intention. This scorched earth existence makes them truly evil and only behind one other character on our countdown. And finally, the most evil character in the arcade, King Candy, aka Turbo. Turbo was a lead character in a racing game that invaded another game at the arcade in an attempt to keep up his popularity.
Turbo-tastic!
As a result of his stunt, both games were unplugged, and that was the end of Turbo, supposedly. In reality, Turbo snuck into Sugar Rush, invaded the game's code, wiped everyone's memory, and crowned himself as King Candy. To make his plan stick, he ripped the code for Princess Vanellope away from the game. However, if Vanellope were to ever win a race, the game would reset, and her code would be reintegrated, thus exposing his grift. To stop this, he manipulated the entire population of Sugar Rush into bullying and terrorizing Vanellope.
Yeah, well, King Candy says glitches can't race.
Keeping her as far away as possible from the race. When she does finally enter the race, he nearly kills her.
End of the line, Twitch!
Before becoming a racer bug virus hybrid who tries to infect the entire arcade. He's a self-aware virus who not only has the capacity to destroy, but also has the intelligence and comprehension to want to do it. That's truly evil.
I'm now the most powerful virus in the arcade!
Thankfully, he's destroyed by the Diet Cola mountain explosion.
Go into the light!
Thank God. There may have been no stopping that monster. A bad guy who was, as Zangief said, a bad guy.
You are a bad guy.
That's our playthrough. Disagree with us? Wreck us in the comments. And don't forget to check out our full Good to Evil playlist. But most importantly, stay wicked.